Hey, you over there cleaning, how about a quick demonstration for us? Lauren Carter's voice cut sharply through the hum of conversation in the martial arts gym, dripping with amusement as she pointed directly at Angela Morgan, the janitor quietly wiping the far edge of the mat. Lauren's pristine white gi and tightly knotted black belt glistened under the harsh fluorescent lights, her confident smirk widening as she noticed her students turning to watch, their eyes flickering with curiosity, discomfort, and, worst of all, a few smirks of their own that mirrored hers. Angela froze for a moment, her hands gripping the mop a little tighter as the soft swish-swish of its strokes suddenly became the loudest sound in the room. For 3 weeks she had cleaned this gym after hours, almost invisible, a fixture on the periphery of their rigorous drills and displays of discipline, never once expecting to become the evening's entertainment. "I'm just finishing up here so you can get back to your class, ma'am," Angela replied calmly, keeping her gaze lowered, her voice polite but firm, trying to preserve her dignity as a wave of heat crept up her neck. But Lauren wasn't done. "Everyone look," she declared, her arms spreading wide like a performer on a stage as she took a few deliberate steps toward Angela, her bare feet slapping the mat audibly, drawing all attention her way. "Here we have someone who's probably never thrown a punch in her life, and she's afraid to even step on the mat. Maybe we should show her what real discipline looks like." The 8 students, arrayed in a loose semicircle, laughed nervously, some exchanging uneasy glances but none speaking up. One student even lifted their phone, camera lens pointed squarely at Angela, ready to record whatever spectacle was about to unfold. And in that moment, frozen under the stark glow of fluorescent lights, surrounded by polite chuckles and cameras clicking, the gym transformed from a place of learning into an arena of public humiliation, every eye waiting to see how far the mighty sensei would go and how deeply the quiet janitor would sink. Lauren took another step forward, her black belt swaying at her waist, and let out a loud laugh that reverberated across the gym walls, bouncing off the rows of framed certificates and black and white photographs of stern-faced martial arts masters, men and women who would have shuddered at what their discipline was being reduced to in that very moment. "Come on now," Lauren sneered, pointing at Angela's plain blue janitor shirt as though it were a costume fit only for ridicule. "I bet you've never been in a fight, right? Or maybe just a verbal one with a mop bucket." The students' chuckles grew bolder, a few leaning forward as if eager to see the show begin, while Angela remained perfectly still, her fingers still gripping the handle of the mop, her knuckles whitening slightly, but her expression steady. Eyes cast downward, hiding emotions that swirled deeper than anyone in that room could comprehend. "I mean, really," Lauren continued, circling Angela slowly now, her voice laced with the kind of cruelty that masquerades as casual humor but cuts just as deeply as any blade. "This mat is sacred ground, the place where respect and discipline are forged, where people dedicate their lives to mastering their craft. And then there's you, sweeping it like it's your living room floor." Angela felt every word land, each one peeling back a layer of composure, memories stirring within her chest of nights long ago when similar insults had come from jeering crowds, insults she had tried for decades to bury beneath the simplicity of a quiet life, a mop in hand replacing the glove she had once worn proudly. Lauren stopped suddenly, her arms crossed, and delivered one final taunt, her voice rising just enough so every student could hear and every camera could capture the moment. "Why don't you give us a demonstration of your best fighting stance? Or would you rather show us how to polish the mat instead, since that's probably the only thing you've ever mastered?" Another ripple of laughter swept through the gym as Angela finally lifted her gaze, her eyes meeting Lauren's, calm but with something ancient stirring behind them, a shadow of battles fought long before this night, long before this petty cruelty, a silence that was far more dangerous than any outburst could have been. For a few long seconds, no one spoke, their collective silence amplifying the insult, the fluorescent lights humming softly overhead as though bearing silent witness to the cruelty unfolding beneath them, until finally a quiet but resolute voice rose from the circle of students, cutting through the tension with unexpected clarity. "Sensei, Lauren," Sophie Kim said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, her young face pale but her dark eyes shining with an intensity far beyond her years. "Why exactly is it necessary to humiliate someone who's just here doing her job, maintaining the space where we all train?" A hush fell immediately over the gym, the polite smirks vanishing from several faces, a few students lowering their eyes as if suddenly ashamed of their complicity, while Lauren froze momentarily before spinning on her heel to face Sophie, her expression a mixture of irritation and disbelief that anyone, let alone a junior student, had dared interrupt her performance. "Excuse me, Sophie," Lauren snapped, using the student's full name deliberately, her voice sharpened to a cutting edge meant to reassert dominance in front of the room. "But who's teaching this class? You or me?" Sophie swallowed hard but stood her ground, her hands clasped tightly in front of her as she replied with quiet conviction. "You are, Sensei. But I thought martial arts was supposed to be about respect and discipline, not making fun of people who can't defend themselves." Angela watched this exchange unfold with a stillness honed from years of silence, but inside her chest something stirred. A memory of her younger sister Kesha standing up to bullies back home, a fiery teenager who had refused to stay quiet in the face of injustice, a sister lost to violence decades earlier, whose defiant spirit seemed to echo now in Sophie's quiet courage. And as Angela's gaze swept slowly across the gym, taking in the uncomfortable shifting of feet and the bowed heads of the students, she knew something had changed. The mood had shifted, the spell of cruelty cracked. But Lauren wasn't ready to yield, not yet. Angela let out a slow breath, so quiet it was almost imperceptible, her fingers finally releasing the mop handle as she straightened to her full height, her shoulders rolling back with a grace and poise that seemed completely incongruent with the plain blue janitor's shirt she wore, every movement fluid, deliberate, almost ceremonial. The air inside the gym shifted perceptibly in that instant, subtle but unmistakable. A tension like the tightening of a bowstring as Angela stepped forward, not hastily or aggressively, but with the calm, measured confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove but everything left to protect, her gaze now level with Lauren's, unflinching and steady. "All right, then," Angela said softly, her voice even and almost gentle, but with an undertone that made Lauren hesitate despite herself. "If you insist on this demonstration, I'll participate, but when we're finished, I expect you to explain to your students why respect matters more than belts, titles, or appearances." Lauren blinked, her arrogant smile faltering for just a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty darting through her eyes as she instinctively recognized that something had shifted irreversibly, though her pride would not allow her to acknowledge it. Not yet. So she let out another forced laugh, gesturing grandly for the students to gather closer, savoring what she still imagined would be her moment of triumph. "Everyone, form a circle," she called out, her voice just slightly too loud, betraying an edge of nerves beneath the bravado. "Watch carefully. You're about to see a real-life example of why hierarchy exists in martial arts." But as Angela stepped barefoot onto the mat, her movements smooth and unhurried, a few of the students exchanged glances, their unease growing as they began to notice the effortless way her body adjusted its weight, the subtle precision of her foot placement, the relaxed but balanced way she carried herself. Small details that only trained eyes could detect, but that hinted at something extraordinary concealed beneath her humble exterior. Sophie, standing near the back of the semicircle, felt a chill run down her spine as she observed Angela's stance. Low, centered, deceptively simple but unmistakably perfect. The kind of posture she had seen only in archival footage of legendary fighters. A silent warning that the woman they had all underestimated was no ordinary janitor at all. Lauren squared her shoulders, pulling her black belt tighter with a theatrical flourish as she faced Angela on the mat, the students arrayed around them in a hushed semicircle, their uneasy expressions betraying a dawning realization that this demonstration was no longer unfolding as their instructor had intended, but had become something far more complex and unpredictable. "All right," Lauren declared, her tone a bit too loud, as if trying to convince herself as much as her students. "Let's begin. Show me what you've got, janitor." Without waiting for a formal bow or signal, Lauren lunged forward, leading with a sharp, textbook-perfect jab aimed squarely at Angela's chest. A move she had executed flawlessly 1,000 times before against students and sparring partners alike. A strike meant to establish dominance quickly and decisively. But Angela was no longer merely the janitor with the mop in hand. She was something else entirely, and as Lauren's punch approached, Angela moved not with force but with an economy of motion so refined it seemed almost effortless, her body pivoting just enough for the fist to pass harmlessly by, her feet adjusting with barely a sound, maintaining perfect balance as Lauren stumbled forward, off-kilter and confused. "Good form," Angela remarked softly, her voice calm and measured as she repositioned herself, "but you're telegraphing with your right shoulder. You always do just before you throw a jab." The students gasped softly as Lauren flushed, her face betraying a flicker of embarrassment and confusion, before she quickly regrouped and launched a second attack. This time, a rapid combination of jab, cross, and low kick, delivered with greater aggression but less precision. Again, Angela wasn't there. She slipped to the side with a grace that defied logic, each evasion smooth and controlled, her breathing even and unhurried, as if this entire encounter were unfolding in slow motion for her alone, the years of forgotten muscle memory awakening in perfect synchronicity. By the third sequence, several students had begun backing away instinctively, a primal awareness rising within them that something extraordinary was happening. A woman they had dismissed seconds earlier was dismantling their instructor's pride and technique, not with brute strength or anger, but with a mastery so quiet and precise that it left no doubt who truly understood martial art. Lauren's breathing had quickened, her movements no longer crisp and calculated but tinged with frustration as each of her well-rehearsed attacks met nothing but empty air, while Angela remained perfectly balanced, flowing around every strike with an elegance that seemed almost unnatural to the students who now watched in stunned silence, their earlier amusement replaced entirely by awe. "What's the matter?" Angela asked quietly, her tone gentle but with an unmistakable undertone of authority. "I thought you wanted a demonstration." The taunt, delivered without malice, struck deeper than any insult Lauren had hurled earlier that evening, and in a final burst of pride-fueled desperation, she launched herself forward with a flurry of punches, wild, sloppy, all form forgotten, hoping that sheer aggression might succeed where technique had failed. But in that very instant, Angela stepped forward, closing the distance in a way that defied logic and training, moving not just faster but smarter, her timing impeccable, her balance flawless, her calm unbroken. Before Lauren could register what was happening, Angela's right palm rose, not with force or anger, but with surgical precision, and connected gently but decisively with the center of Lauren's chest, a touch so light that to an untrained eye it might have seemed almost harmless. Yet the result was immediate and shocking. Lauren's body lifted slightly from the ground, her feet leaving the mat as though propelled by an invisible wave of force. Her balance shattered completely, and she flew backward several feet before landing flat on her back with a loud, echoing thud that reverberated through the gym and into the hearts of everyone present. For a moment, no one moved, the silence absolute and profound, every eye fixed on Angela as she lowered her hand slowly, her breathing still perfectly steady, her expression serene. A woman who had just proven without a shadow of doubt that true mastery required neither spectacle nor aggression, only quiet, disciplined control, born of experience and understanding. Lauren lay on the mat for several long moments, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she stared up at the stark white ceiling tiles, the fluorescent light suddenly seeming far too bright, her mind racing to process what had just happened, her pride lying in the same heap as her body while a heavy silence pressed down on the entire gym. Slowly she sat up, brushing damp strands of hair from her face, her gaze falling first on her students. Some looking away in embarrassment, others wide-eyed with quiet respect for the woman they had so recently dismissed. Before her eyes finally found Angela, who stood calm and steady, her posture impeccable, her breathing even, her expression unreadable but devoid of malice. Sophie Kim, standing near the edge of the mat, still clutching her phone, cleared her throat softly and said what many were thinking but too afraid to voice. She wasn't just a janitor, was she? Lauren's face flushed deeper, but this time it wasn't anger, it was shame. Real, raw, and unvarnished, as she finally climbed to her feet, brushing invisible dust from her gi before turning toward Angela and bowing deeply, the gesture stiff at first but then softening into something genuine, something humbled. "Mrs. Morgan," Lauren began, her voice low but clear, audible to everyone in the gym who now listened with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "I sincerely apologize, not just to you, but to every student who witnessed my behavior tonight." She hesitated a moment, glancing around at her students whose opinions she had taken for granted, their expressions quietly judging her now in a way that mattered far more than before. Before continuing, "What I did was not teaching, it was arrogance masquerading as instruction. And I am ashamed." Angela nodded once, slowly, allowing the apology to hang in the air long enough for its weight to settle on everyone present before responding, her voice soft but resolute. "An apology is a beginning. But what matters more is what you teach these students tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after that. Because respect isn't something you demonstrate once, it's something you live." The students exchanged glances again, but this time their admiration was directed not toward the instructor they once revered, but toward the quiet woman who had taught them the most profound lesson of the night, without throwing a single punch in anger. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere inside the gym shifted in ways both subtle and profound, the air no longer thick with the unspoken hierarchy that had once dictated who deserved respect and who could be dismissed, but infused instead with a quiet sense of humility that spread like ripples from the moment Angela Morgan had stepped barefoot onto the mat that fateful evening. Word of what had happened spread quickly, first among the students themselves, then through whispers in the wider martial arts community, and before long, video clips discreetly captured on phones that night began circulating online, viewed and shared by thousands who watched in disbelief as a black belt instructor was effortlessly, almost gracefully, dismantled by a woman many had assumed to be nothing more than a janitor. Lauren Carter remained at the gym, but her tone softened noticeably, her demeanor transformed not by defeat but by the hard-won understanding that true mastery required more than perfect technique or an embroidered belt around one's waist. It required humility, patience, and a willingness to recognize dignity in every person who stepped through the door, regardless of their title or role. Angela, for her part, accepted an offer to stay, not as a janitor but as a teacher of a different sort, leading quiet seminars not just on advanced fighting technique but on discipline, grace under pressure, and the deeper philosophy of martial arts as a practice of respect, resilience, and self-acknowledgement. And in those small but powerful moments, when older students bowed more deeply, when younger students listened more intently, when Sophie Kim smiled quietly from the back of the room knowing that her voice had helped shift the tide, the true lesson endured. That the measure of a person's worth was never defined by their uniform or rank, but by their character and how they treated those with no rank at all. So if this story moved you, remember, sometimes the most profound victories are won not with fists but with quiet dignity, and sometimes the most important teachers are the ones we almost failed to notice.